on this episode.
I went back to school and got in 2015, I think I got a master's in biomedical engineering. And then my mom fell in 2018. And um I was able to apply the sensors that I had learned about, not the same sensors, but the fact that it was a sensor controlled system that I learned about in Anheuser-Busch to a system that said, okay, we could use sensors to not eliminate, but minimize the need for a healthcare worker.
Today I speak with Sheila Buswell and her journey on becoming an inventor of a life-changing medical device. I guess, tell me, where does that story start for you?
So, I mean, I didn't think I was going to join the military. I joined the military because I lost my scholarship, and I was like, well, I got to pay for school somehow, right? So I joined the military to pay for school, like so many people do. And I ended up getting in an accident in Bosnia, and I got a medical discharge, right? I guess that's kind of where my story starts. In many ways, I learned a lot from being in the military that I didn't expect. And I think that's been very valuable. Like, as I go through life, I don't react to stuff like that other people do. Like, being yelled at doesn't affect me at all. I mean, I get mad because I'm like, you're yelling at me. I don't like that. But I'm not intimidated by it. And then people standing close to me, I know you're trying, like, once you've been through basic training, somebody being yelling at you and standing super close, that doesn't work as a mode of intimidation. And so I think I'm not huge in stature. I'm not super tall, and I'm not big. So people think, oh, I can intimidate this person. Nope. So I think that has benefited me in ways that I never accounted for. Like, I didn't anticipate that. And 20 years later, I can say, absolutely. When I got my medical discharge, I was injured. And I spent a lot of time, just rehabbing for that. And I always had an idea that I was going to do something technical, right? Because that's kind of how my brain works. I mean, I had a scholarship for mechanical engineering before I went in the military. But when I went to school and even after school, I knew I wanted to do something technical because that's how my brain works. And I worked at a lot of great companies, but none of them, I got tired once I didn't have something to learn from them anymore.
What was your job in the military?
As a generator mechanic. Well, I cross-trained as a generator mechanic. But when I left, by the time I left, I think I was shop foreman of like generator mechanics, 63 Juliets which is chemical equipment repairers, and like HVAC people.
So,
and then
you said your brain works. Was that something you always kind of had? Was that mechanical brain, or is that something you kind of fell in love with?
I don't know. I don't know, like, I could figure out how stuff worked, but it was more important in the military. Like, it was the first, I don't know, it was the first time that I ever used that or exercised or flexed that muscle. Does that make sense? Like,
No, it does. So you were applying it rather than just.
yeah, like for um times in school, like I could figure out where gears went. And I remember that was part of the ASVAB test, the Armed Services Vocational Testing Battery or something. And I remember being like, oh, I could, like, it was almost fun because I knew it would ask you, this gear goes this way. How does this gear go? And I could figure that out. And it was almost fun to me because I could I could figure that out pretty readily. But like I said, that was all before I could figure out how stuff worked. And that was my benefit and use. Like, I learned how to fix generators of all sizes. I learned how to fix trucks, depending on what it was. It's not like I could but but depending on what it was, they're a lot more complex. But a lot of times I was attached to a tanker battalion, and I think I learned a lot simply because I was like, oh, well, I'm not just going to sit around, I'll hand somebody tools if I can't do something else. And I would just watch like what was broken and how it was fixed.
No, I get
I
it.
don't know
I
if
mean,
that,
I've spent many of nights standing with a flashlight when my dad was yelling at me. So I get it. You pick up a lot um when doing that. There's a reason why, we talked about this earlier. I got into HVAC is because I do have more of a mechanical brain knowing how things liking. So I relate to what you're saying a lot.
I was a better student after I saw how, like, as a mechanic, like after my time as a mechanic. I don't know if that makes sense. Like when I went back to school, I was better because I could apply it to stuff.
So I don't know. A lot of people. So Elon Musk has this quote, and I'm gonna butcher it because I don't have it right in front of me. But it basically talks about how people need to know the why to truly learn and understand something. So I think by when you're doing mechanical things like that, you do end up learning the why. You learn it like when my wife to kind of give you an idea. I was trying to fix our dryer, so our downstairs that dries our clothes. I ended up my wife was like, "Well, how does it work?" And I started breaking down like all the individual components and being like, and telling her like, "Oh, this is the thermo sensor, and I'm like, it needs to have this much impedance, like it can't the ohms on it are still in they're still in spec basically, right? I'm still getting a connection here, or you know the the heat the heat exchangers, they don't call it that in a dryer, but anyway, the heating element is still working. This is still working. So I think it's this. And she's like looking at me so blanked faced. And like, I'm like, oh, sorry. But when she just knows that the thing works. I'm like, when you ask me how something works, I'm trying to break down the individual components. But when she looks at it, she just sees a box. And there's a
Yeah.
big difference there. Like she just sees a thing. I see a stack of parts. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it, I, so as much as I am going to pick up my phone, like people look at this and they see magic or whatever. And I think it's the same thing. Like there are people who look at this and see a bunch of like electronics and Python code or whatever. This is an Apple device. So I, they have their own operating system and things like that. So I think the ability to see things not as just a box does like change how you're able to approach troubleshooting it. I I taught school for like, I don't know, a year, and I can appreciate that now. Like people cannot troubleshoot if they just see it as a box. Do you know what I mean? If they can
Yeah.
see it as a combination of parts, like I taught biomedical electronic technician classes. So like, but there was a troubleshooting component to all of them. But one was like biomedical physics, biomedical instrumentation. I can't remember all the classes off the top of my head, but like part of it was a troubleshooting, and it's like honestly, there was a point where my dad was like, he's a physicist, so I had trouble with physics, he'd give me more physics homework. And I'd be like, at first, it really frustrated me because it would be like, well, I'm having trouble doing the homework that I have. You giving me more homework is not going to help. But there was a point where it was like flipped a switch where all these problems are the same. If you learn how to solve one, you can figure out how to solve them all. So if you learn how to fix your dryer, you're going to be able to fix a autoclave, or like if you see it, the heating element, and that's the same as the heating element in an autoclave. That's my point. And I
I
think,
don't know what an autoclave is, but it sounds like I might be able to work on
well, autoclave just gets it has a heat exchanger and it just gets stuff really hot so you can like sterilize it in a hospital. Anyway.
So, but so being working on furnaces, and I have to like, get off too off track. I when I opened up the dryer, I was surprised how many similarities were there between a furnace and a house and your dryer at home. Now, granted, the heating element's much smaller, right? And they need to have a mechanism to turn the tumbler. but instead of a tumbler, let's turn that into a blower, right? And instead of a heating element, let's make a heat exchanger. And there you go. There's the big difference between a furnace. Also, is it gas powered or electric? Right. That there's another element add or take away. But for the most part, they are very similar. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
wow, this is crazy how similar these two things are. They have heat switches, like limit switches in there. Like if it gets past a certain um, point, then we're going to turn this thing off so that you don't catch your house on fire. That the same things are in a dryer as they are in a furnace. So anyway, it was surprising.
It is surprising. And again, words are really hard for me, but like, it was the same thing, like that physics question, like that physics homework. It was like, there's a point where you're like, all those are the same. They have slight differences, but essentially they're the same. Just like all that equipment, essentially the same. I mean, there's little differences, but you figure out the differences and then you can look at them the same. And yeah, it was.
So you got that from the military, the breaking down, or was that? I guess because we kind of got off track. So, were you getting that beforehand, even with like the physics homework from your dad?
I think it was a combination of both. I mean, I definitely applied it in a different way, like academia versus like, okay, I can say this without a doubt that there is a sense of urgency to getting something fixed. Like if your lights don't go on because your generator's not working and you need, or like somebody's not generator's not working or whatever, it is a lot more important that you get it fixed than if you can't do a physics problem. So being able to troubleshoot and accurately replace what needs to be replaced. Initially, when I started as a generator mechanic, and they didn't have a lot of them, I think they still don't have a lot of them, because I just got called to be a generator, like for a job for being a generator technician this week. Is weird because they still don't have enough. The idea that it's more important to get it done than if you turn in your homework and you don't get a question right, it lowers your grade point average. If you don't get your lights on or you don't get your heat or you don't get something else, it's different.
Well, it could be life or death, right?
Right. And uh, it's initially when I started doing it, I'd be like, okay, this isn't putting out volts that it needs to, just replace the main gen. And then it got to be, or it's not starting, replace the engine. And then I got better at it, and I would get more, I was going to say more better, but I would get finer replacement. You know what I mean? Like I would replace.
No, I get it. Smaller. I get it completely. But I don't, maybe for people that are listening, it's like instead of rather than replacing the whole engine, you figured out, oh, it's not the engine, it's this
so what
fuse that broke.
Yeah, the fuel injector. And yeah, that is what would be, and yeah.
I don't want to talk too much shop, but I get what you're trying to say, that because of, instead of having to, because that's expensive, you have to replace the whole engine every time. That's the sign of somebody that's either a new mechanic or they're just bad, right? So it's the same thing with like furnaces, right? If they get to it and like replace the furnace every single time, that company's not going to do well, because people are going to recognize they're just trying to get sold stuff, right? So you need that balance between, okay, maybe say you are working as a generator mechanic from the military, but you notice that this particular generator is breaking down every week because it's old as heck. Maybe that time it's, let's replace the generator versus let's replace it.
For people there's different levels of maintenance in the military that doesn't exist in the civilian world. So like the engine would get sent back to a different level of maintenance, and they would just find the part that needed to be replaced. Like, let's just say the fuel injectors. That was a common thing because they were diesel generators that ran off JP8. And I go in the weeds because I'm an engineer, but that was commonly what broke. So it was like you take off the whole engine, replace it, but you'd replace it with a different engine. You wouldn't replace it with like a brand new one from the factory. Like in the civilian world, it would like be a Briggs and Stratton engine that's $20,000. In the Army, it would be like they'd send it to depot level maintenance, and that person would break down the components and find out what exactly is wrong. I don't know if
Yeah.
that
No, it does. It makes sense.
the government
Um,
spends money on gold toilet seats, not generator engines.
so so you get into a point, and I think it's important maybe we went over that because you kind of, I feel like you've, from going through that, you've become a better student to the
Oh
military.
yeah, and honestly, I was a better. Sorry, yes, Samson, thank you. I was a better engineer, honestly, because like my time as a generator mechanic. I mean, after Anheuser-Busch, I left that job and I worked as at a government contract. I actually worked for the company that made the generator that crushed my foot. But that's a different story. And it's not like it was the generator's fault. But
Well,
the
we
guy's
can
like,
get
I'm a
there.
generator.
We'll get there.
So I ended up getting a generator mechanic, like who was working in the same group. And I could identify that he didn't know what he was talking about. Like, because I knew what I was, you know what? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I knew I had a mechanical engineering degree at this time, and I had worked in the military as a generator mechanic. But I don't look like what people expect when they see a generator mechanic. He looked like a generator mechanic. So people thought he knew what he was talking about. He so didn't. But he, could fake the funk because he looked the part.
Oh, I
But
get
it
that.
was
1 second. I think someone's ringing my doorbell. I am so sorry. 1 second. Sorry about that. The power editing will edit that out. So so you said that because he looked the part and you didn't, would they question him instead?
no, they never questioned him. It was one of those things where I was like, I don't I was able to call him on some stuff, but basically people judge books by their covers, and I think sometimes that goes further than I'd like to admit, but that is a truth.
I no, I'd agree with that. So the first company I worked for doing HVAC, my hair was shorter at the time. I was very clean cut, but I had a beard, like a huge beard. And for some reason, I must have looked more the part. We'd be standing in front of customers. He's trying to sell this $30,000 system to somebody, and they'd be staring at me the whole time. So when they're asking questions, they'd be like, "So," and then instead of talking to the owner of the company, they're asking me, and I would just kind of be like more like pointing him towards my boss because it's like, look, I don't know what I'm doing here. So don't get me wrong, looking the part is huge, right? And even my boss would pick up on it. He'd be like, "What the heck, man? Why do they keep talking to you?" And I'm like, "Look, man, I don't know. I have a I have a face that you could probably tell I've been through a lot. Maybe that's what it is, or I don't know. But there was something there that they would look to me instead of him, and maybe it's like they thought I might be more confident.
Well, I do think this sounds, I don't know what the word for this exactly, but like I think you can exude stuff. And I think you can, like, people pick up on, like okay, so the guy's title was, professional generator technician. I mean, that was his title, right? So not only did he look the part, that was his professional title. And I think you can exude that, "No, I've done this professionally." That doesn't mean you're good at it, right? Like, I think a
Yeah,
lot of time, um, but there's people who are awesome, and like first day they are awesome at. My brother was great at table tennis when he picked up a paddle. It has nothing to do with anything other than, his eye-hand coordination, and he could, I have no idea what. My eye-hand coordination is garbage. My depth perception is off, but he was great at it. And I mean, I, I do think you can, yeah, I think that people pick up on vibes and you're competent. So, yay.
yeah.
I
I don't
mean,
know. I just thought it
bad
was
or ill
weird.
intentioned.
But anyway, I could tell. I've been told I should have been an engineer, so that's funny. 'Cause I can tell we have similarities. We'll get into the weeds. Um, So keeping on with like, because I try to keep this in like more of like a story format. I think it's the best way for people to follow. Where you get out of the military, um, and where do you go from there?
I went back to school. And when I was in the military, I made a really good friend and we had a lot in common, but she's the only person I know of. Everybody I met joined the army for like college money, but she's the only person I know of who went to college on the GI Bill and finished their college degree. I mean, I know people now who have done that, but she's the only person at the time. So we talked like daily. And in a lot of ways, leaving the military was hard because I was the only one of me at my place. I'm pretty sure she was the only one of her, but we knew each other. So I finished my degree, she finished her degree, and we both went to work. And um it 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 was different when we both went to back to school because we were older than our contemporaries at school. And we were the only, in a lot of ways, in our perspective programs. But we had been through a lot that made us like, okay, we went through a lot to get here. And we went entered the workforce. It was the same thing. Like, okay, I have the degree, check. I have the test scores, check. And I had sacrificed a lot to get here. So neither of us put up with more, I don't know how to put that. Um, we didn't worry about like trivial stuff, right? So when we entered the workforce, both of us, we both had this idea like, okay, there's more to this. We didn't enter it just for this. We went through a lot to get here. It's not just for the paycheck. So, I mean, we both graduated in like 2005. But in our careers, she's advanced in her career is very different. She's a forensic toxicologist. And I'm a engineer, obviously. So I went from mechanical engineering at Anheuser-Busch to, government contracting to I made spinal implants and instruments. And I think we talked before about like Nietzsche saying, if you have a why, you can endure anyhow. Or I'm probably butchering that quote because it's not in front of me, but that's basically it. And I was like, well, I didn't love that job. Like we did cadaver labs and I could like, cause it was spinal implants. And I like convinced myself that it's not going to turn into a zombie and attack me because it doesn't have a head. Like that's how I got through the cadaver lab. It didn't smell bad or anything, but I was like, I could get past the fact that it was a human body because I was like, well, it doesn't have a head. And then I was doing an occipital cervical thoracic and it had a head. And I was like, oh my God. And I was thinking of Monty Python and that knight that has like no arms and no legs. It's like, I'll chew your leg off or something.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, I had an idea of a zombie doing that. And I was like, yeah, I'm not scared of that. It's fine. I can run away from it. And it was like I proceeded through that. But after that job, I ended up getting my master's in biomedical engineering because I was like, that's kind of cool. So I went back to school and got in 2015, I think I got a master's in biomedical engineering. And then my mom fell in 2018. And um, I was able to apply the sensors that I had learned about, not the same sensors, but the fact that it was a sensor controlled system that I learned about in Anheuser-Busch to a system that said, okay, we could use sensors to not eliminate, but minimize the need for a healthcare worker and people could take themselves to the bathroom. So I
So
invented a device.
real quick before we get too into it. So when your mom falls, she just like it was a freak accident, and then she ends up like in the hospital.
She was in the hospital and then she was in rehab. So like, I don't know if people are in the hospital, there's a lot of stuff going on and people are just more worried about survival and they're not worried about like independence and their identity at that time. But as people get better, right, and they're in rehab, it's generally a thing where it's like, myself included, um, I could identify more with. You care about the fact that you have an entourage to conduct all the activities of daily living, like going to the bathroom, and you need an entourage, and it's a drain on the healthcare system to take you to the activities of daily living, like toileting. So
I guess
to
why I asked the
minimize that.
question, because it seems you very for you to go out of your way and be like, you know what, I'm going to try to invent a device.
Oh, I
That's
did. That wasn't my first my first impulse. So I went there to Arizona. I live in St. Louis. I went to Arizona. And my first impulse when I saw my little mom, like, first of all, anger is not a good emotion, but that's what I was. I mean, I wanted to just burn that place down. And it took me a while. I'm like, there's got to be something better than this because it's not a good situation. I mean, this is
But why
2018
were you
when there
mad?
was,
Were they not helping her? Would she sit around for a long time before someone would show up? What was going on to cause
well,
that emotion?
she wasn't getting helped, but it wasn't that they weren't helping her. It's a systemic problem. Like, there's just not enough people. So, like, my mom's tiny, but OSHA says, like, you're supposed to lift repeatedly 51 pounds. Healthcare workers repeatedly do more than that. So they're often injured on the job. But like, I wanted to burn that place down. Arson is not my forte, right? Like, I don't know how to go about burning it down a building. But I thought about this problem. I'm like, well, this can be fixed. We just got to figure it out. And so first I was like, well, um, planes have autopilot and drones have the ability to take pictures. They can stabilize to take pictures, right? So how do they do that? So I researched a lot of how they did that. And then I'm like, um, once I found out, okay, it's possible. Who's working on this now? So yeah, it
So
wasn't that it
what
was
was the
ill.
initial what was like the initial like inspiration, I guess? Because you're watching this happen to your mom and you sound like you're mad at first. You're like, this isn't cool. Like why isn't she being helped? You know, there's a lot of an emotion involved in that. But when did you get to the point you're like, you know what? I can I can do something about this.
I don't think it was ever. It's never a thought that I could do something about it. It was like, oh, there's a problem. How do you fix it?
So
Right?
your
Like, because
engineering brain kind of kicked in.
yeah, like you would need to walk up to a generator and be like, it doesn't start. Why isn't it starting? And it was the same thing. Like, why is this a problem? Why does this problem exist? Why hasn't this gotten better in the last 20 years? Like, literally, I fell in 1998 and the best solution was a Norwegian nurse took me to the bathroom all the time. So, why in 2018 is it not any better? My mom was 110 pounds when she went into that rehab place. Like, her hip healed, but she left there 98 pounds. So, like, she had a lot of other ailments and infections that because of this. I mean, and that happened, that's a systemic problem. So I think the healthcare workers don't like it and the patients don't like it. And the healthcare system itself knows this is an issue. So
So you're kind of coming up with an idea like, okay, we're gonna figure this out. So there's autopilot, there's you have your time learning about like the sensors. How does that all kind of come together to kind of guess where you're at now?
oh, it was very iterative. First, my first step was to find out that, or first discover that why isn't anybody else working on this? Nobody else is working on it, and then I started working on it. And then I was like, well, I didn't start the business until a full year later, calendar year later, more than, yeah, it was a full calendar year later because I was like the iterative figuring out how it should be solved and then figuring out that nobody else was doing this. And then it's a whole and then trying to get it patented. So yeah, it was we have a utility patent still pending. We just had an office action, but it's not like it's done, right? But it's definitely pending. So it's not like I had an aha moment. It was more like iterative, like, okay, this will fix that problem. Oh, how would we? And then knowing it's physically possible was not something that was ever questioned because this is stuff that's done. But it's like putting it all together. And why isn't it utilize now was simply that the barriers to entry are so great. Simply the FDA getting approval. And this was before the pandemic, right? So I think the impetus of there's a lot of healthcare workers leaving the field. There's a lot of personal, you want to limit interaction if you have to. And this would do that. So, and there's a lot of lawsuits. So the desire to solve this problem is greater now, I think.
Yeah, and also like think about if there was a device that could do this, right? Where okay, now I don't have to be escorted to just, use go pee or take a shower. All that. That's very powerful to somebody I think that's in that kind of situation. Obviously there's probably going to be limitations to it, but the fact that like, oh, I can now use this to assist me up and now I can go pee and then it can take me back. That's huge. Especially to someone's like probably mental health.
There is, again, it doesn't exist yet. So I think that's right. I think mental health is going to be a huge thing. And I think you'll heal faster and better because I know from personal experience, it's horrible to have some, like having somebody there was horrible all the time because, okay, not to give too much information, but they're like, well, you can't be released until you do this. And I'm like, well, I can't do that because you're right there. No, it's the opioids. No, I'm pretty sure it's because you're right there because I gave up the opioids 2 days ago. But here you are. And I mean, it's difficult to have that conversation because it's like if you don't, okay, you need to have help to go, right? Like, and this isn't just old people. Like you could have pain medicine for a myriad of reasons. You could be a knee replacement. You could be in a car accident. You could have blood pressure medicine. Like there's a lot of things that could render this necessary, but I think most people understand it as being for old people, for elderly. But I was 21 when I was, in this situation. So I don't know how to, it's not just for old people, but I think most people can identify for that. But even if it is just for old people, there's somebody you love in this situation. And it's hard. Just like I mentioned earlier about the military families, it's hard to see somebody you love in that situation. It was easy for me in a lot of ways to like compartmentalize, like, okay, this is part of my life, but it was torture to see my mom. You know what? Like in that situation, like, I don't know how to put this. I had to do a lot of things in the military in my underwear in front of other people. My mom wouldn't do that, but like she had to use the bathroom in the hallway. There was just a lot. She had to have male people take, like, I don't care. Like, I was in Europe. I didn't, whatever.
So can you explain, um, to the best of your ability, what essentially the device does?
Yeah, I can. It would, like, hospitals evolve, right? So like even in the same hospital, it wouldn't be the same configuration, but like if you call like a nurse now, you would call this device and it would come to you like a Roomba and then it would drop a nylon strap and then you would hook a harness that is fitted a cut like to you. So the harness would have the sensors in it and the sensors would know it's you, and the upward mobility is what we're calling the device would know, okay, this device is attached. And then you put the harness on like a jacket and then close it like a seatbelt. But the upward mobility would know, it's this person and it's attached right now. And then the healthcare worker would know, oh, this person is attached to this device. And they would know your location, they would know your status, and you'd move under your own control. But if you needed it, it's there. So like if you stumbled, most people fall going to the bathroom between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. There's a lot that happens there, but most people fall in rehab facilities in that time. So let's just say if you are going to the bathroom and you have trouble getting up off the toilet, it notifies the healthcare workers that you had to be stabilized getting up off the toilet. Or if you need more help, they know where to send it. But it can stabilize you if you need it. If you don't, you move under your own power. So like that's the basic functionality of it. And then you go to your own bed, you go to your bed and do the same thing in reverse. Take the harness off like a jacket, unhook it, it retracts and goes back to where it lives like a Roomba.
So I'm sure you might have already thought about this, but just the way my brain works, I feel like I have to say it. So this sounds like you could also use it for rehabilitation too, not just going to the bathroom. Because then if you think about it, if it's now able to stabilize me and I'm able to move my own, like say I'm trying to rehabilitate my knee or my ankle, I can now start walking, and maybe you could even like increase the amount that it holds me up while I build strength in my ankle. Or
100% it can do that. And there's devices actually that do that, but they fit around a treadmill. This is designed to fit around a toilet and through a door frame. This is the size of it. The devices that are on the market right now, they need a physical therapist to help you into the device and take you out of the device and like use the device. This wouldn't you could use this completely independently, but it would keep track of how much weight, how often you need it. And then, okay, the idea that it could, like maybe when you get your knee replaced on day 1, you need it more, but on day 30, you still don't want to fall, right? But you might not need it as much. I don't know if that makes sense. And
it
it can
does.
track. So the idea that it empowers the person, you can keep better track. But right now, it's like you go to physical therapy an hour a day, maybe Monday through Friday. And this is like a more everyday, multiple times a day kind of thing.
So the
And
hospital might even be able to like lease it to you or something.
Yeah. And you can have like, it depends on the layout. You could have 1 per room or 2 per room, or like the reason it can serve the upward mobility can service up to five or more patients depending on the layout. The problem is there's different layouts, like I said, and if the bathroom and the people in the room and this thing can't open a door, right? So if it comes to you like a Roomba automatically, it can't, from where it's stored, that we're going to have industry professionals that that partner with the hospital and be like, okay, this is what you'd need ideally for this to work properly.
Or even maybe you could put a button on the upper mobility that interacts with the door. And it'd be the same thing as like, when you hit a button and it opens up the disability thing for people.
That would work. All that costs money. But so right now the cost of goods for the upward mobility is around $16,000. And the selling point is based off of like hospital beds. And the cost of goods is based off of like all the bells and whistles that we anticipate you needing. But like the hospital bed, the most expensive hospital bed is actually, I think, the ones that have like mattresses that blow up, and then to keep from, I don't know what they're called, the pressure sores. What are they called? Bed sores.
Bed sores, yeah.
They have hospital beds can be $5,000 or $35,000. It just depends on where in the hospital they're located. Like, obviously, you don't need stirrups in the cardiac wing or whatever, because you're not delivering babies or taking pap smears.
So you could do the same thing with your upper mobility device. That's
the idea, is there might be different levels.
Well, think about it. Like, so you have an iPhone, right?
Yeah.
I don't, but I know how this overall works. So iPhones, you buy the iPhone, right? Well, there's also the iPhone S and the iPhone X, or I don't know what they are, but there's like multiple tiers. And what they do, and a lot of companies do this, but Apple, I think, is pretty good at it. They'll offer a thing that works and it does the job at this baseline price. But then you go up one step. Oh, but this one also has, let's say your base one has 32 gigs of memory. This next one has 120. Like, oh, but I might need all this more memory. And then so you start looking at this other one. They're like, oh, but this next one up from that also has a better camera. It's got a little bit even more memory. And then you're like, so you end up it's kind of a step program because where it, especially for people that are enthusiasts, it walks them up the ladder, right? So if you think about it from like a hospital standpoint, it'd be the same thing. Like, oh, this one, it will go to them automatically. It helps them to the bathroom, but it doesn't open doors. The next one opens doors, but it costs a little bit more because you have to have a guy come out and, you know, but I get the idea.
Well, and that's the thing, like those bells and whistles that we really don't know what would be needed. We like lifts currently on the market do like 500 pounds, 300 pounds, and then 500 pounds. They're not, it's, I've talked to every level of management, and there's this disparity, right? Like of what is desired and what is not desired. And there's this disparity, a chasm between managers and people who take care of people facing. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to like wait to go to the bathroom. So it makes sense that maintenance is a concern of both, but they're both worried about different things. Like the people who are managers are worried about whether you have to have specialized maintenance come in. And people who are patient facing are worried about like somebody calling it to go to the bathroom and having to wait because it's uploading a library or it's updating a library or a software system. So that was an analogy to just kind of say, look, we don't know what we don't know because what we get is different input. I think what we need is when we finally build a prototype, we plan to have it at the end of this year, the end of the summer, is when, oh, it'd be great if it did this. It would be great if, because it's not just the idea. It's not just that the upward mobility would have a button, that door would need to have a button to, or a way to open to. And so they would all of a sudden now need to modify the doors.
I don't think all they would have to do is just add a thing that would open, right? You could have a button on the door and a button on the thing.
I think they would be, there's some hospitals that would be open to doing that, and some of them would be like, nope.
Well, that's why you tier it, right? You don't make it standard. You just say, hey, we have this option for an upgrade. It's like a car, right? You have an option to get the thing that's got 200 more horsepower.
Yeah. And I think, so like, for instance, one of the healthcare workers was like, oh, where are you going to store that? You have to have a place to store it. And
That's a valid point.
I lost sleep over this, and I was like, oh, we'll just store it over the toilet. It's a whole thing. If it fits around the toilet, we can store it over the toilet. It's fine. We'll figure out a way to charge it up above, and we'll run the, it's a whole thing. I figured it out. But I talked to another healthcare worker, and they're like, well, there's places that it would be a concern, but some places it wouldn't be. And in rehab hospitals, it's not going to be a concern. My mom's rehab facility wouldn't have been a concern. She had real estate in her room. It's just if you can prove the value. It has to prove the value of it being.
Or you could even make it where maybe it folds up, right, to some degree.
Yeah,
without compromising the system. But I'm sure if you could fold it up so it takes up a little bit less space, there's that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions out there, and I think it's important to get this input, but and it's important to answer the concerns of the healthcare management, but it's also important to address the concerns of people who are patients and patient facing, like the healthcare staff, because if they don't use it, it's not going to be, there's this thing called I think it's called the Da Vinci robot. And it was like the doctors liked it, but the insurance companies were like, costs more and a doctor still needs to use it. So we're not going to rebuy it. So there was a lot of initial orders, but it wasn't used. So
aren't they starting? That's that bot that can come in and like do surgery, like in very high end places. Like they really like it because it's very invasive.
You still need a surgeon to run it. So they like these high end insurance is like, we're not going to pay for somebody to go to medical school at Harvard and then pay for a robot too. So you have one or the other. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like they're not.
Well, the insurance doesn't know what they actually.
Well, it's weird. It's kind of like they are not. They got a lot of initial orders, but they're not replacing at the same rate that they initially sold at, I think. And I don't want to lie to you about that, but yeah, that's essentially what it is. And I think that people who like places that have high net worth individuals, it's going to be less of a concern, and they're going to be more apt to buy that high end version we were talking about. But yeah, there's
Well, my buddy, I think, got heart surgery done, or he actually has passed away since then. But he had that Da Vinci thing, and the idea was that it would be less invasive and it'd heal faster. Because when a surgeon comes in to do heart surgery, and I could be wrong, I thought they'd use this thing, but when they do surgery with that machine, it doesn't have to cut up as much, and it's just like just goes in and
oh,
does its thing and then leaves.
it's I think that's a thing that the surgeons love it. The people in the healthcare industry, that patient facing ones, like it. And I don't want to, I hate that I'm saying this, but the insurance companies, I think you have to get them on board too.
Yeah,
And
no,
I think
I get it. Because think about it.
limiting.
I know I could correct. I'm not a surgeon, so maybe they can't do heart surgery with it. But I thought they could. Like, imagine if you're doing it by hand, you have to break open their rib cage and separate their rib cage to do this. But let's say the
Yeah.
machine can go in through one little hole, doesn't have to cause all that trauma, and now I can work on your heart without breaking your rib cage. That's huge. If you really think about it.
And if I'm going to get heart surgery, I'd rather a little hole than a big one. And I am
or
not.
Like, or how long are they going to take to recover? Maybe that's the way you sell it, right? Maybe it's overpriced. Maybe it costs so much that it doesn't justify the amount of time the person's going to be in the hospital.
Well, and I think I don't know, but as an engineer, I love that robot. First of all, I like robots.
Yeah, I like robots too, but
as a business person, I'm like, they just didn't sell it to the right people. They sold it exclusive. I don't know, right? Like, it's hard for me to it's like talking about what Giselle and Tom Brady's relationship.
If they sold it to the insurance companies, too, they sounded like they needed to sell
it. If they at least needed to get buy-in, I think. I don't know. Again, I don't know. But
you have to tell the insurance company, look, you're going to get sued a lot less. You're going to have less people coming back after you because there's going to be less.
It's going to cost less in recovery because rehab hospitals are expensive. So
yeah, I said that too, right? Because you break open their cage. Like, how much longer is it going to cost to heal, to fuse my bones together in the middle of my chest versus a little hole you came in,
right?
Maybe you fixed a valve or something, right?
Right.
I bet I'm going to be out in a few weeks versus like a few months,
right?
Because a bone takes forever to heal.
Right.
Yeah. Like I hurt my ankle, and I don't even think I hurt a bone. And it was still hurt. It took probably like 2 years for my ankle, where it was like 100%, where I felt like I couldn't run on it.
So things heal, and as I get older, I'm like, things don't work and heal like they used to. Yeah, I feel that way too. Like I don't know like what sells people on stuff, but I think that's an important skill, and to get the buy-in from all the people, or say who is the market for your device. Well, who writes the check isn't all the customers, right? There's a long ripple effect here, and that's to address all of it is hard. And I mean, the devil is details.
This might be a little, you must believe in the product if you've gone this far, but what I guess the question I'm getting at is, are you pretty optimistic that you'll have this device in hospitals within the next 5 years?
Yes, absolutely. I think if it's not my device, a device, because, well, first of all, we're at a breaking point. There's a bunch of healthcare workers leaving the profession, right? Like, they just don't want to deal with it, burnout and blah, blah, blah. But also, it's like, I believe that this is something that exists and the technology is there. I would have loved if somebody else was doing it. I just would have gone to work for them. But the idea, I myself would love to just be able to call a device, to do whatever and make myself more independent in those cases. I feel like um, but I think in 5 years, I have learned a lot since I started this whole thing, but I think I have a lot more to learn. But I absolutely know it's possible. And I know that there's a problem that exists. It's just trying to make sure that my solution matches what is needed.
So with the amount of work that you're putting into everything, is this eventually going to have a payoff for you where like, cuz I'm sure right now you're working for free, right? It's a lot of effort to put into something and never get paid for it, but in the end do you think it will reap some sort of financial benefit for you? Or I mean
Um,
that's the hope, right? And then eventually you'll not just get put in all this free work and not get any sort of benefit from it.
yes. It's supposed to, based off my all the projections, right? It's going to hockey stick in 3 years, right? Absolutely. But this is I mean, I had a lot more steady income, and I had a 401k and I had vacation and blah, blah, blah. But this is the first time I'm like, oh, I know how to, like, the skill set I have can make things better. Like, solve a problem that I will face again. There's no doubt it's going to affect me. And it would have made my mom a lot better a couple years ago. So it's not like I'm an altruistic, noble, like, there is so many times in the last week I felt like, oh, if I had just got back from vacation, if I just went to work, it would be so much easier. But I cannot say that I was a really good engineering student. I don't think I was a good employee ever. I mean, I
So
learned a lot.
I don't ask that question to make you feel like to make people think that you're just in it for money. I'm just more it's more of like I just know how it sucks to work on something and like do it for like years at a time and then not get any sort of benefit from it. So I'm just it's more of a curiosity question for me. Like hopefully you eventually get some sort of benefit. You know, that if you put in that much effort, and you created a medical device that changes the world, I would hope it makes you a millionaire. Like if I'm just to be blunt, right? Because that's something that helps the whole society as a whole. I think I've been told that before. If you want to, I think there's and I may forgive me if I'm on a side tangent. A lot of people feel like millionaires or people that made a lot of money, didn't do anything to add value. And there's some degree of truth to that to some degree. But I'd say a large majority of self-made millionaires added a lot of value, and that's how they got there. You don't just get to places without adding value. No one just gives you money for that without adding value, right? So it's gotta, and I would argue that device adds a lot of value. If it's adding a lot of value, there better be a paycheck.
It's hard because I'm like, I I feel like my life won't change every day. I'd still like live the same way because I'm very lucky as far as like the nuts and bolts of my life. But I feel like I'm working towards something that matters. At the end of the day, it's very like this is an interview. We talked about job interviews. An interview question I've gotten before, like, what was the best job and worst job you've ever had? And the answer is without a doubt the same as it was my first interview. The Army, when I was a generator mechanic, I hated going to the field. I hated being dirty. I hated being smelly. But my best job was a generator mechanic. I loved when people brought me broken pieces of equipment and I did what I did and it worked. And I got the lights to come on or I got the generator to start, whatever. And I think the same thing is true. Like I would probably live the same and eat the same food and eat this, like, it's not going to change appreciably how I live my life if that does happen. But oh my God, if I needed to, be in a situation to have a better alternative and know that I helped that happen would be huge. Like that to use that, to take that analogy again, like I made that generator start or those lights to come on because I was able to I mean, it kind of makes it worthwhile. Like that losing my scholarship, going in the military, crushing my foot, working for Anheuser-Busch, that whole journey, it's not like any of it was particularly hard, but I didn't love it. Right. But that whole thing would be totally worth it if, my mom could take herself to the bathroom and didn't have the problems that she had as a result. I don't know if that makes sense. Again, not a huge altruistic person. I'm not saying I would love to like have all the money and like I hate one of the things that I loved to do was buy my husband great birthday presents and Christmas presents. I bought him socks the last few years and that sucks. Like it sucks to not have money after. I mean, I got used to it when I was in school and when whatever. I've lived lean times before, and I can figure it out. And buying my husband socks is not a huge like whatever. But I would love to be able to, pay for stuff again.
I would argue if you were trying to get rich, there's easier ways to do it, right? But
Oh yeah.
That it was more of just like again, like I hope you end up getting paid off for your efforts, right? It's like, I love as much as I love doing podcasting, it doesn't really make me money right now. And my dream would be that it makes me money and I could live a life that, is fulfilling. But it's not all just about money either. It's also about, you kind of said it earlier, it's about the journey. And I think for anybody that's like listening or has like goals that they're trying to achieve, really if you're to stay on something long enough to where it actually is going to reap a reward, you have to enjoy doing it.
Yeah. And I think that's true. For a lot of things, that's so true. And yeah.
Because
You said it a lot more eloquently than I did, by the way.
Well, if you think about it, like, so it's because a lot of self-reflection, right? So doing, say, this podcast, I probably won't make any sort of real money at it for at least 5 years. That's from all my projections and studying and everything else. That's usually how long it takes. And I would argue 90% of people wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't be able to make a podcast every week for the next 5 years and not get paid a dime. Right. So if you take that now instead, and podcasts are relatively easy to do in comparison to, I'm now inventing a medical device that is going to change the way hospitals, maybe work with rehabilitation and getting people to the bathroom. And now I have to invent all these, it just, remember we talked before the podcast about the wall of awful. There is like a huge, there's a huge wall of awful now that I have to get through, to even get to a point where I make a paycheck.
So I don't have that issue of like the wall of awful, but I didn't think of like getting a mechanical engineering degree. I thought about, I have to take this class and that means going to class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so I'm just going to, full disclosure, that was really hard sometimes because sometimes those classes were full of douchebags that I did not like to sit next to. But, I did it. And I got through Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then that added up. And I think, I graduated in 2005 and days go by. Just like I ran a marathon and it was like steps go by and miles go by and 26.2 miles happens. But I didn't think about that. Like I just kept my mind on the training run or the step in front of me. I didn't think about long term. I didn't set out to invent a medical device. That was never I don't know. Like I never planned to do it. I 100% thought somebody else had already done this. Like I was like, I'll just go down. Even now I'm like I have patent protection and stuff, but I'm like, well, if somebody else, like you said, very few people would do this. I think a lot of people have ideas, but very few people will chase them and do what it takes. Podcasting.
Oh, there's a lot of podcasters, right? There's like, it's a very crowded market, but I could tell you just from doing my own research, very few of them are of high quality or have like, a lot of them don't have a plan. They just ramble on about random things. They don't have like a structure. And I think that's really holding them back. And then because of that, if they don't see any growth, they're just going to give up. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. Cause I think that's a lot of things. Like, okay. It makes people think, talking about looking like stuff. you're either good or math or bad at math, and people are scared of math. So when I got out of the military, I had taken the calculus series before the military, and afterwards I had to take differential equations. I totally didn't remember anything. Like I was like, okay, one of them looks like an S, and one of them I didn't remember anything. And I was, but the GI Bill won't pay for you to retake classes. So I had to relearn everything. And I spent from when the math lab opened till it closed at night. I don't remember how long I spent in there, but I knew I could do it if I just set my mind to it. And I think if you apply yourself to that, like to podcasting, most people won't do that. They just be like, okay, I can't do it. And I think like the same thing. Like I don't have like, it's not like anybody went bibbity bobbity boo, you're good at math. Like I didn't, and it irritates me actually when people are like, oh, you're good at math. Fairy godmother didn't make me, I don't have one. So maybe I do, I don't know. But like the idea, if somebody goes, you're in 5 years, oh, it's just because you were lucky at podcasting. It's not because you stuck with it. And it's the
Yeah, and
same kind of,
it's more than that. But yeah, I would argue if I get to a point where I'm successful at it, part of it is consistency. And it's kind of like the same thing with anything you do in life. Um, it's like an iceberg. People see the top, but they don't see all the work or everything
yeah.
underneath that took you to get to where you needed to go. So I really hope that you are successful in your endeavor in getting this created, because my mom, she broke her hip, and apparently your hip is like, luckily she's not, I think she was like in her 40s at the time when it happened. So if you think about it, if she would have been older, let's say she was in her 70s, that's a lot harder on your body, but your hip still takes a very long time to heal. So if that device was there, I'm sure she had to have help going to the bathroom at first, before they just.
It's, I, again, I go in the weeds, but like there's a clock that's first tick. I think it was when you're 60 that like there's mental stuff in your brain when you fall and get hurt that you get scared to do things because you're going to fall in your mind. And once that switch seems to happen, it's like around 60. And so it becomes more of a mental thing than a physical thing. And so then you do less. So then when you do more, you're more likely to get hurt. And then when you're more likely to get hurt when you do stuff, you do less. Anyway, it's a self perpetuating thing. It's
So I'm
horrible.
pretty young, relatively, but even me, I've experienced that. So I've been going, and without going into the weeds too much, I've had this battle with my hormone levels being all kind of messed up, and because of that, my bone density isn't as big as it should be. So I've been doing a lot of things to kind of do strength training and to kind of help to fight that off. But if your like testosterone drops too much as a man, then you end up breaking your bones easier, right? And at one point, my testosterone was like in the 90s, and that's, for a man, that's really low. And I started noticing that if I fell or if I did certain things, my bones would break. When I was younger, my mom would tease that I was like made of steel, because things would hit me and it wouldn't affect me. Like you know, like I'd be fine. She like they think I would have broke something, and no, I'm, you know, like, oh, you don't even have a scratch on you. And then so it's kind of weird as an adult, like having that happen, like, oh, what the heck, I broke my hand, and because I fell or something.
Oh
So
yeah, I I was just gonna reiterate. Yeah, it sucks.
so I think women go through a similar thing, right? When they go through menopause, that they have to be more careful because their hormones are all crazy. But I'm not sure. I'm not.
I went through a weird thing with my hormones, and I went through a thing where I bruised, and I wouldn't even know like where the bruise came from, and I'd be like careful about doing stuff, not because um it hurt, but because people's reaction to me. I had a black eye. I get black eyes. Like I had a black eye when I got married because of a root canal. Anyway, I get it. Like it's hard. Yeah.
Um,
So it's
good.
just hard.
So, to kind of wrap this up like full circle, because I just know how we can just kind of go on tangents here. Um, what are like any final thoughts, I guess, and or anything if people want to help you out, like support you or look more into your story? Do you have anything out there?
I have a website, buswellbiomedical.com. And then for a while, I was trying to get motion samples of people like standing up and sitting down to just build this machine learning library to find out what normal motion, like doing that. And actually, it's pretty, I can go into weeds on that too, but it's pretty, um, it's just like people standing up and sitting down looks the same on every, like if it's stability, it looks stable across the age spectrum in both sexes. I had data scientists look at the data. I collected like 100 samples of people and it's kind of amazing. But it's just like just know, and if it's important, please reach out to me. My email is sheila.buswell@buswellbiomedical.com, or just look at the website buswellbiomedical.com and then reach out to me if you're interested. That's it.
Heck yeah. And I'll put all those links in the description, and we'll kind of go from there.
You were talking about if I had so like I I don't think most people set out on an entrepreneurship journey, and I think that's what you're doing with the podcast too. And I just say this, don't give up. Like if you can't, I think that's a Martin Luther King quote, something about if you can't walk, then crawl. What like just keep moving. Just keep moving forward. And like Rocky, that's one of my favorite quotes. It's a Rocky quote about like it's not how hard you can punch, it's how hard you can get punched and keep moving, keep going forward. And I think that's important. Like life can punch you in the face a lot. And I just think it's important to just get up and keep trying because, yeah.
So on that, I listened to being in like part of the reason why I even got into podcasting. I listened to a lot of podcasts, right? And there was one yesterday. I forgot who he was interviewing. It's going to drive me nuts. But they said something on there that kind of blew my mind. It was one of those things where it's most people, it's like not what you, I know what it was. It's not necessarily always like what you set out to do. Like basically the idea is that you need to, people that are indecisive, right? They, they don't, it's not that the people that are decisive are necessarily more successful because of it. It's because they made a decision and then they stuck to it, right? So if someone's indecisive, they may not stick to it because they don't know if they made the right or wrong decision, and they're worried about that. But the person that was decisive, it's not that they made, even if they made a quote unquote bad decision for them, they just made it work. And I've butchered that completely compared to how he said it. I think it was it's not a podcast. It was Healthy Gamer GG or whatever is the guy that said it. I forgot his name, but I listened to him a lot, and he is the one that said it. And he said it probably a lot more eloquently, but it still was powerful to me because it's like, well, if I'm making a decision, I need to stick to it, right? And it's the whole idea of like delayed gratification, and there's a lot that gets into it. But
I think I think that's philosophically just so accurate because it's like, well, I think my favorite podcast is like, I don't even know if it's a podcast, How I Built This, right? And that's probably, I don't know, have you ever listened to that?
I'm writing it down. I may have,
But it's
but
like stories of things you wouldn't expect, right? Like, I don't like a pizza oven, right? Like a guy talks about how he's trying to solve a problem of like, not for any particular reason, but he was like, and the guy who made Culver's, right? And he was not going to get into the pizza or into the, sorry, I talking about pizza ovens, but he wasn't going to get into the restaurant. But like he ended up in the restaurant industry and then he ends up owning a chain of restaurants and he wasn't going to um he wasn't going to make it a chain anyway, like a series of unfortunate events, but worked out to be fortuitous. But it was like he stuck with, like once he went away he stuck with it and he learned like things didn't work out always, but he learned from those mistakes, but he kept moving forward. And I think that that's philosophically something I like. Anyway,
Yeah, you know, when
it's
he said it, it like made a lot of sense to me because it's like, and it's funny how life works out that way. I, I sometimes I think I'm crazy because I'll be having a thought or I'll be going through something in my life, and then the answer almost just kind of comes to me, and like I get chills thinking about it because it happens to me more often than I realized, and I don't know if there's a God or what, but it's weird because I was literally have talk. I asked my wife during dinner, "Do you think I'm indecisive?" Because I've have this big thing of like I've been having this internal struggle of like what direction do I take in my life? I'm kind of feel like I'm in a turning point, and I kind of took a step back from HVAC because I was like burnt out, overworked, and I'm kind of mad at myself because I've worked so hard at getting good at something. Right? I worked very hard to get good at HVAC. Within 2 years, I felt like I could lead a team to go in and install a bunch of in people's houses. Right? There's a lot more to learn, but I did feel like I got pretty good in the minimum amount of time I had. And it's like, well, you have this natural talent for something. Why don't you keep doing it? But then there's this other side of me that's like, no, I need a break. I need to take a step back. I have this other passion that I really want to carry out. And so I have this internal struggle of like, well, I can make money today and go and do this other thing, or I can try to make this work. And I think people know what they really want deep down, but we kind of lie to ourselves and we don't give ourselves permission to follow our dreams. And I'm kind of on my own little tangent here, but essentially I know what I want, but I just need to give myself permission to do it. I really want to do it. I've ever since I was a little kid, if you ask me what do you want to do when you grow up, I wanted to be a movie producer. And it's funny because podcasting is very much has a lot of those elements of like, oh, I get to put the camera at a certain angle, and it lets me do what I want. As weird as it sounds, but
I don't think it's weird because I feel like I did that too. I was like, I spent a lot of time and energy like and do like what I felt I expelled a lot of my life to like get this. And what am I doing with it? And I said I watched graduation speeches. I have a list if you want to know my favorite graduation speeches. I can tell you the most inspirational ones. But like I think when like you're indecisive because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up for I was well into my 40s before I was like, yeah, this is it. But it wasn't like it literally was like, okay, I was in a holding pattern and then I was like, okay, this is it. But it's not like it was like a aha moment. It was like, oh, I guess, you know what I mean? It I don't even know if that makes sense. But it was like, nope, I'm going to do this because I am the person who has had this experience. I have the education. I know this is possible. I'm going to do it. But it wasn't like I anticipated. If you asked me when I graduated if I'm going to start my own business, no, I've got a job at Anheuser-Busch. I'm going to work there. Everyone worked there for 30 years and then retired. I thought that's what I was going to do. Right. Like it didn't, I don't know how to put it, but I get what you're saying. Like you don't like it's not that you're indecisive so much as you don't know what you want until you see it.
yeah,
And
and
say
I think it's even more than that. I think I knew what I wanted since I was a little kid, and I never gave myself permission to chase. Maybe not everyone has that, but I've always wanted. When I was like, I've been obsessed with storytelling since I was a child. I always liked the idea of like creating. Like I feel like I should have pursued being like say a movie, being in the film industry because there's a passion there. I've always had it. I'm the type of person, if you're watching a movie with me, I could tell you how it's gonna end. Like it's like a superpower. I'd be like, oh yeah, it's this that guy did it. And my wife I stopped doing it because it pisses my wife off.
yeah, I think it would irritate me too. I'm the person I irritate people differently. If I read the book, I'm like, I'll tell people in the book it was so and my husband will be like, yeah, we know it was better in the book.
But yeah, no, you see patterns though in like movies and things like that, and then you get to a point where you're like, it, a good a good movie changes it up, changes the pattern, and then you don't really know what's going to happen. But I feel like a lot of people that make movies they follow a certain pattern, and then it just becomes easy to know.
So you seriously always know, and I don't. Like, I am seriously surprised. I could go, oh, like, and it's not like I don't have pearls to grasp, but like, I mean,
No, I think some people, like, if you're going to get philosophical, some people really have an idea of, I think I've always deep down knew, but like we put all these like things in our way, right? Oh, I need to make money today. I need to do this right now. Oh, my parents have this or want this from me. Or you're going through all this stuff where there's certain situations in your life and you just don't realize. But if I was to strip all of that away and you like were like, you need to choose something now, and I didn't have any other external pressures on me, I would have chose to be to go into movies. And I'm betting if I were to do the same thing for you and I take away everything, you may not even be doing what you're doing now. But if I told you, what do you, if when you were younger, what do you really want to do? You may have fell into being an engineer because like, or sometimes I don't think when you're younger too, like that's maybe I'm wrong because sometimes you don't have all the skills or sometimes you don't even know it exists. There's that too. So when you're a kid, you don't know, but I knew because I saw it, right? You said that something earlier. You don't know until you see it, but I saw it when I was a kid, and I just never chased it.
yeah, I
And
totally.
and maybe for you, you hadn't seen it yet, and then when you did see it, I can get on a tangent, but
I can see that because it's like
I'm
I
like
know.
thinking out loud.
No, I know people who like my husband's like that and my friends like that. The day I met them, my best friend was like, "I'm going to be a special agent with the FBI," and that's what she was. My husband was like, he knew all the time he was going to be an engineer. He's going to like whatever. I literally was like, okay, with a bachelor's degree, you can make this much money, and this is. My brain works that way, but seriously, I did a calculation to know how much money I'd make and how much whatever. Like, and I think there's a point where people are like, well, your math and technical scores are good enough. Like it's it's and I I do think that there's a difference in people in that way, but I was like a point where I was like, life is too short. I am gonna do something I like. And when that I didn't know what that was, but when it literally like hit me aside the head before I was like, okay, I'll do it. Whereas you always knew that. And I think there are people like that that exist.
I knew it, but see, like this is the thing is that I never did chase it, right? So there's like a something else right there, and that's like unpacking like a whole other
But
side tangent. But
I think you are chasing it in your way. You have no like podcasting can be like movie producing. I don't know because I know very little about it. This is going to be like my camera debut. Maybe I'll get discovered on this.
well,
But um it's you never know where it's going to end up. Do you like Bill Burr's he has a podcast. I have never listened to the whole
yeah,
podcast.
I do. So Bill Burr's like he's controversial sometimes, but that's his whole stick, right? Is that he says like, and it's just funny the way he says things. I don't necessarily if it was somebody that was somebody's real opinion, I don't necessarily want to agree with them, but it is funny because it's more of a
Well,
comedy.
my sister hates him. But I'm like, I don't, again, like, I don't think it's his real opinion. I think he says stuff and he may or may not mean it, but he
No, he's a
points out
troll. Yeah,
and
he's a
he
troll.
points out the irony in the logic a
Yeah,
lot of times. And I think you have to follow that. And I think, I like him and I like the points that he makes. Like, well, I like Dave Chappelle for the same reason. Like, it's not like I'm like advocating everything he says, but I like the fact that he does point out flaws in logic that
yeah, and
like
I
Dave
think we need that
George
in
Carlin.
this country. Yeah, because there's like a lot of yeah, George Carlin, same thing. I think a lot of people have now gotten to, and this is a whole other thing, but they've gotten to these extremes where they can't agree. It's like you say one thing if somebody says one thing you don't agree with, you now just don't like them. What? When did
Yeah.
that happen? Like, why can't I agree with 90% of what you say and not like this one thing? And then we can debate on that one thing. And maybe you change my mind. Maybe you're right. Like, why is that not a thing anymore? Like, we could talk right now. Like, I can tell I'm sure we have a lot in common, but I'm sure we could get to a certain thing and be like, oh, we definitely don't agree about this, and we could hash it out. And I think reasonable people understand that. They understand that like people are fluid. People aren't. If you were to record me like indefinitely and be in the spotlight for like say 10 years, I am guaranteed to say something that someone's not going to like or that I don't even agree with 10 years later. So, yeah.
Yeah. And God, I don't even know who said this, but somebody said it that we've mentioned today. It's like, I don't get mad at a picture because it wasn't taken today. And I think logic and the people's viewpoints change. Like how you feel on a subject can evolve, and it should. But pictures don't change, and like quotes that people say, and you're gonna like, I might not agree with something I said several years ago. Who knows? But yeah, I you know what? I totally forgot you were recording, and I enjoyed this conversation. You're good at this. I mean, I don't know what the final product's gonna look like, but yeah.
No, no, you're fine. I got into podcasting because it was I love talking, right? I it's what it ended up happening as I worked as a delivery driver at Domino's, and I started having these random conversations with people, and I've kind of done it my whole life. Where even before that, I worked as a like when I was in my teenager, I worked as a lifeguard, and I'd end up having these conversations with people, and they start telling me these like crazy details about their life from just talking to them. And maybe it's because I'm relatable. Maybe I have some sort of charm to me. And next thing you know, I'm getting this crazy story. Like I was at Domino's, and this guy is telling me the story about how he was a groupie with Motley Crue, and he was going on all these crazy parties, and he was a really good storyteller. But he got this huge thing. And I'm like, why am I recording this right now? Like, this is some good content. And it kind of clicked in my brain, like, wait a second, like maybe I have a knack for this. And so I'm still discovering it. It gets a little weird when you put a camera in front of somebody's face, and I'm finding that out. And um and trying to become a better interviewer, and ask good questions and things like that. But yeah, I really think podcasts do the best when they're in a fluid conversation and they're unfolding a story, because people are as a listener, I'll enjoy listening to stories, and if people are just ranting on, I'll turn it off. So
So I have so many sisters, but like my sister Mary, like that would happen to her. Like she would just random people tell her stuff. And I shut stuff down. I don't like people talking to me. The fact that I'm talking to you on long form is like amazing. It's not I have the gift of the gab a little bit when you get me going, but I will totally avoid conversations if I can. Cuz I don't know how to put that. I That's one way in which I'm a stereotypical engineer. I don't like there's certain topics I just don't want to talk about. Like I was at work and a guy came up to me and asked me why women don't like me. And I'm like, oh, here's my pencil. I lost it. And I like visibly threw it under my cube and went under there until he walked away. Cause I just didn't want to talk. Like, because of this conversation right here. I don't know. I don't know why women don't like you. Why are you asking me this? Like, there was so many layers of why I didn't want to talk about this, dude. But I didn't want to have the conversation. And I went for interviews, and like it was this before I started up. Like I had to sock away money for the startup. I would have had money to build a prototype, but the whole COVID thing happened. And before I did that, I went on an interview for a startup, and I was the only person without a PhD. And I had to go to the bathroom. There was no toilet paper it was a bathroom. It was only one bathroom for male and female. And I just walked out. I didn't want to have a conversation about, I'm not going to work here because I'm not going to be the only person without a PhD, the only woman, and the person who apparently is the only one who's going to be like, oh, I'm going to use the last piece of toilet paper, and I'm going to leave it knowing that there's an interview and somebody else could be using it. But in a startup, everybody has to do a job, like all the jobs. If you can't be above changing the toilet paper. And I didn't want to have that conversation, so I just left. I don't like to talk to people about all the time. Anyway, that was my way of putting that long form. Again, easy to talk to.
yeah, so So I don't know. I feel like people naturally gravitate towards the, things that they like or are good at, right? Kind of random, monogamous, or anyway, what I was trying to get at.
I I think that you are better at things that you like.
Yeah. Well, and
There
that
are
part of that probably, and I sorry to cut you off. I think part of that is because you like it. Remember, we had mentioned that earlier that if you're to in order to stick to something, there has to be some sort of passion behind it, right? In order
yeah,
for you know,
100%.
so like it's like you with the, I think the medical device thing has enough passion in it for you to want to stick to it. It has engineering, right? It also has emotion because I think that's something that you now have you was it Nietzsche? Is that his Nietzsche? You mentioned, um, you know,
The why and the how. Like if you have a why, you can do anyhow or whatever. Like you
yeah.
can.
So you have the skill set, you have the the how or the why. So then that's the why and the how, and now you're able to go and it's probably a. I know we've been ranting on, but that's how you're going to get through all of the rejections. And oh, we're not going to give you the money, or oh, now we're not going to.
Yeah, I keep getting moving forward when I get punched in the face because I get
Yeah,
punched in the face a lot. I'm just saying. I mean, I have been punched in the face figuratively and literally, and being punched in the face literally is a lot harder, I think, to recover from. But if you don't have a why, then it would be easy to stay down. And I think the same thing. Like if you don't love it, I know a lot of people who were miserable at what, and they weren't particularly good at it, like you said, because they didn't follow their passion. Right. So I think that they're miserable. They make other people miserable, and they probably don't change the toilet paper when it needs to be changed.
or put their
Saying,
shopping cart away.
or put their shopping cart away. They make other people miserable anyway.
um, so I guess we'll wrap it up. You did mention earlier you had the website. You and if Are you still looking for people for the data, or you're past that point?
We're so I'm pretty sure that's going to come up again, but we're in a pause right now because I think we're going to redesign the harness right now. The data I took had 4 inertial measurement units in it. Go off in the weeds a little bit, but we're using the data specifically from one, and I think we're going to redesign that and then download the data in a different way. So when we do that, we'll probably start that up again. But no, right now we're not. Anyway, I don't. The answer is yes in the future, but not right now. Is
Okay.
that Is
No,
that maybe is that a good answer? I don't know.
no, it is. It is. I would say I would love to have you on again. Um, because I think it'd be an awesome conversation to have when you've gotten past it and it's actually out there and people are using it. Because that's
Okay.
got to be that. Then I think the conversation takes a different turn. Now it's like, oh my gosh, people are using this thing, And then maybe
Yeah.
we can go more into like the weeds,
Yeah.
because I feel like looking back, maybe we could have gone more into the technical details, because there's probably people out there that would love to hear, how the interworkings of it. And I think I'm just the only nerd out there, but I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of people that enjoy
Oh,
the
and I would love those
interworkings of
technical
things.
questions. If people send me technical questions, I would love to answer them because can I tell you that like I get questions like I did a pitch last year and the question was, how's it like an exoskeleton? Is this like an exoskeleton? Which I don't know, you might not have heard of an exoskeleton, but my product, not at all like an exoskeleton. So, but uh, anyway, please email me, sheila.buswell@buswellbiomedical.com, or just look at the website. If you have technical questions, please ask them to me. And I would love to answer them.
Well,
It would get
thanks for
my juices
watching.
flowing.